Hello, my name is Amy Vernagallo. Welcome to the presentation of my study, Legally Compliant Behavioral Interventions, the Use of Functional Communication with Multiply Controlled Aggression in Children with Emotional Disabilities. I became interested in this subject due to the difficulties I have seen these past 10 years in educating students with severe emotional disabilities. In part, this difficulty is due to the heterogeneous nature of students with emotional disabilities. There's a wide variety of biological or environmental factors that often contribute to emotional disability, and often there's interplay between the two of those as well. But there are some commonalities between students with severe emotional disabilities, which I discuss here. Often students with severe emotional disabilities respond to normal situations with inappropriate behavior or emotions. They also demonstrate difficulty maintaining interpersonal relationships with others, and there has been research that has shown that over 70% of students with emotional disability also have an underlying expressive, receptive, or pragmatic language disorder that may impact their ability to communicate effectively with others. What's interesting about intervention planning, specifically for students with emotional disabilities in the educational setting, is that there are both federal and state mandates that have set forth requirements for behavior support plans under the law. One example here would be this law taken from Illinois School Code that requires for schools to emphasize positive interventions that are designed to develop and strengthen desirable behaviors, as well as incorporate procedures and methods consistent with generally accepted practices in the field of behavioral intervention. I thought this is especially relevant given the recent adoption of Senate Bill 100, which is an attempt to stop the school-to-prison pipeline for students. This law specifically provides more comprehensive support to students with behavioral needs and only allows for restrictive discipline when behavioral interventions have been exhausted. One such accepted practice in the field of behavioral intervention that seems to meet the requirement of being designed to develop or strengthen desirable behaviors is that of functional communication training. Functional communication training is a type of differential reinforcement in which an individual is taught an alternative response that results in the same class of reinforcement that was identified as maintaining the original problem behavior. There are typically 3 stages of functional communication training. The first is that a functional assessment is conducted to identify reinforcers for problem behavior and the conditions that may evoke that problem behavior. The second is that a socially acceptable communicative response is strengthened by reassigning the reinforcer found to maintain the problem behavior to that communicative response. And finally, the functional communication training treatment is extended across settings and caregivers. The main purpose of the current study is to link solid behavior intervention strategies that would be considered to be compliant under Illinois special education law. However, due to the paucity of research on students with severe emotional disabilities, this study also sets out to extend research completed on children with severe emotional disabilities, as well as to extend behavioral research aimed at children who demonstrate average range intelligence, and extend behavioral research aimed at the treatment interventions that can be implemented with students who demonstrate co-occurring attention and escape-maintained behavior. The participants involved in the current study are 3 elementary-aged boys with behavioral disorders and a history of physical aggression. All 3 boys are educated in a self-contained special education classroom setting and demonstrate aggressive behaviors during both academic tasks and whole group instruction. All 3 of these boys have been suspended from school for aggressive behavior towards others. Prior to the study, an FBA had been completed on all 3 boys, specifically targeting physical aggression, and results from the FBA indicated that the aggressive behavior was multiply maintained by both social attention and escape. It should be noted that all 3 boys demonstrate average range intelligence, demonstrate difficulty with interpersonal relationships, and although are able to communicate, they do demonstrate some language deficits, especially with regards to pragmatic language and expressive language. In terms of setting and materials, intervention sessions were conducted within the student's classroom during small group math instruction, which was a subject identified through the FBA process as a time when aggressive behavior was more likely to occur for all 3 subjects. The classroom itself included kidney tables and chairs for small group instruction, as well as a small whiteboard and markers to be used by the students, and other materials for instructional learning, including math books and workbooks. The classroom also included desks and chairs for each student, a place for reflection about behavioral choices, and a calm down corner. A level system is used within the classroom for students to earn increased options for activities during choice time, which occurs 2 times a day. A token economy is also used in the classroom for the students to earn classroom dollars that can be used within the classroom store. The variables in the study include a dependent variable of physical aggression, which can be defined as hitting, kicking, punching, picking up chairs, picking up desks, throwing items including chairs, instructional materials, writing utensils, other classroom materials, and tipping over desks. The independent variable, then, was functional communication training. Data was collected continuously on the number of physically aggressive incidents that occurred per day per student using event recording. An event was defined as any combination of the physically aggressive behaviors mentioned on the previous slide. A separate event was recorded after 1 minute of non-occurrence of physical aggression. Pencil and paper were used to tally the number of aggressive events per day per student, and 2 classroom aides were trained to observe physical aggression and record frequency of events per student on the daily basis. Inter-observer agreement was scored using total count IOA, which is calculated by dividing the smaller of the event count by the larger event count and multiplying by 100. The mean inter-observer agreement obtained during 40% of the conditions was 100%. In fact, both observers recorded the same number of events for all 3 children on all of the days that IOA was calculated. Treatment integrity of the independent variable was recorded by the observers during 30% of the sessions in the study. Integrity was at 100% throughout the study. A social validity questionnaire was adapted from Witt and Elliott that was specifically meant to be used in the educational setting. This questionnaire was given to both the children's teacher and their parents. Results indicated that both teachers and parents felt the intervention focused on an important behavior, that the intervention was positive, appropriate for the behavior, easily understood, and was an intervention they would recommend to others. All raters felt the intervention was beneficial to the child they rated. A multiple baseline design was used because acquisition of a skill does not typically lend well to some of the other designs, such as reversal. This design was also able to give me a way to compare the intervention across all 3 subjects. Multiple baseline design rules out threats to validity because behavior changes when and only when an intervention is applied across all 3 subjects. Multiple baseline designs control for threats to internal validity as it specifically rules out the threats of both history and maturation. Intervention procedures were as follows. During baseline, it was business as usual. The students were able to earn tokens towards their classroom store and also continued to earn points on their point sheet towards the classroom level system. During phase 1, the phrase "I need help" was introduced. During the first phase, functional communication training was implemented daily during math class. Prior to the start of the first session and every session thereafter, the child was instructed to verbalize "I need help" when faced with a challenging task. If a student began to demonstrate aggressive behaviors, the instructor would wait 5 seconds and then prompt, "Say, I need help." When the child repeated, "I need help," immediate attention was provided to the child. Independent verbalizations of "I need help" were immediately responded to with attention. Any continued demonstration of aggression after the initial prompt was ignored, while a verbal prompt of "Say, I need help" was delivered every 10 seconds until the command was emitted. Independent verbalizations of need help were further reinforced by giving 3 additional classroom dollars. Verbalizations after 1 prompt were reinforced with 2 classroom dollars, and verbalizations after 2 or more prompts were reinforced with 1 classroom dollar. During Phase 2, the phrase, "I need a break," was introduced. All procedures from Phase 1 were still in place with the exception that in the second phase, they were given another instruction to verbalize, "I need a break," if instead of help they needed time away from the challenging task. Additionally, any continued demonstration of aggression for 5 seconds after the initial prompt of say, "I need help," resulted in a second prompt of, or say, "I need a break." When the child repeated, "I need a break," immediate escape from the task was provided in the form of a 5-minute break. Independent verbalizations of "I need a break" were also immediately responded to with opportunity for escape from the task. Continued demonstration of aggression after the initial prompt was ignored, while a verbal prompt of, say, "I need a break" was delivered every 10 seconds until the command was emitted. Independent verbalizations of "I need a break" were reinforced the same as "I need help." Any independent verbalizations resulted in 3 additional classroom dollars. Verbalizations after 1 prompt were reinforced with 2 classroom dollars, and verbalizations after 2 or more prompts were reinforced with 1 classroom dollar. This figure shows that aggressive behaviors were seen at stable trends and levels for all 3 participants at baseline, with an average of 6 aggressive events per day for Tommy, 7 events for John, and 9 aggressive events per day for Brian. During Phase 1, the phrase, "I need help," was taught. When the first phase of the intervention was applied, aggressive events decreased by an average of 50% for all 3 participants. Tommy demonstrated a decreasing trend in level in aggressive events until aggressive events showed a 0 trend and stable level at an average of 3 aggressive events per day. John demonstrated a decreasing trend in level in aggressive events until aggressive events showed a 0 trend and stable level at an average of 3 events per day. And Brian also demonstrated a decreasing trend and level in aggressive events until aggressive events showed a 0 trend and stable level at an average of 5 aggressive events per day. During Phase 2, the phrase, "I need a break," was taught. Prior to initiating the second phase of the functional communication training, aggressive events were at stable level with 0 trend at 3 aggressive events, 3 aggressive events, and 5 aggressive events per day for Tommy, John, and Brian respectively. In the second phase, Tommy, John, and Brian all demonstrated a decreasing trend in aggressive events until aggressive events became stable at 0 levels across all 3 participants. The current study demonstrates that functional communication training is an effective intervention that teaches socially acceptable ways to access both attention and escape from task as an effective way to reduce aggressive behavior in children with serious emotional disabilities. In addition, these findings provide support to the use of functional communication training as a legally compliant intervention that is both positive in nature and designed to strengthen desirable behaviors while incorporating a method consistent with generally accepted practices in the field of behavioral intervention. Although the use of multiple baseline to evaluate the effectiveness of functional communication training on aggression controlled for threats to internal validity, including both history and maturation, because functional communication training includes a positive reinforcement component, use of multiple baseline was not able to control for effects of reinforcing students for using communication using classroom dollars versus being reinforced with attention or escape, depending on the condition. Future research, then, that would serve to increase the validity of this study would include research that compares the use of increased tokens, as in the classroom dollars, for appropriate behavior, which is essentially the use of DRA, versus functional communication training alone, versus both DRA, or those tokens, plus functional communication training. Future research may also explore how other accepted practices within the field of behavioral intervention may be legally compliant under special education law, especially if case law sets precedents for behavioral interventions that have held up in a court of law. Other research applications may include FCT to other pragmatic or expressive language barriers to decreasing problem behaviors, applications of FCT to improving interpersonal communication skills in students with emotional disabilities, as well as further research supporting the use of FCT in individuals with average range intellectual ability.